I refer you here to the first quotation from Newman under the heading of the handout, one of my very favourites. It ought to be graven on every Catholic's heart. He wrote it as an Anglican, but he doesn't take it back. In fact, the Grammar of Assent is a thematisation of it, I would say. Look at that first quotation and think about what it means. When men see what each other mean, they see, for the most part, that controversy is either superfluous or hopeless. Now, why would he say a thing like that? Well, he would say a thing like that because of our second point under 3a. If people really are differently catechized or differently situated, then the idea that argument, especially argument of a single epistemic calculus kind, will be the way to convince everybody of any claim that you happen to run across. That makes no sense. In fact, argument, as we'll see in a moment, is generally useless on matters of foundational disagreement. That's something which makes everyone shift uneasily in their chairs. It always makes Thomists shift very uneasily. 3a3. This is an unpacking of 3a2. Judgments as to the axiomatic and as to prior probability are unavoidable. What does that mean? It means that any pattern of reasoning about anything at all, whether it be theological, historical, anthropological, geographic, mathematical, whatever you like, any pattern of reasoning about anything at all will require axiomatic commitments. That is to say, commitments to assumptions that it makes that it cannot, within that pattern of argument itself, justify. That's the very definition of an axiom. You might remember your Euclidean geometry. You simply have to work with the definition of a line and a point. There's no point in asking Euclid to justify those. You have to go with it and see what you can do with it. That's an axiom. I'm being crude here, but that's how it works. Every pattern of reasoning is like that. Commitments of an axiomatic sort are unavoidable in human reasoning in every sphere. Also, commitments as to prior probability are unavoidable. This is most evident in patterns of reasoning such as the historical. Prior probability means what you think it likely to happen. Everyone has an understanding of the world according to which certain things seem likely and other things seem very unlikely. For example, my view of the world is that it is extraordinarily unlikely that the United States will defeat England in a game of football which will occur tomorrow. You may have a different view of the world, but insofar as we have a different view, that will be a view about prior probability. It seems a priori just unlikely to me that that will happen, and therefore I will order my life in a different place than you would if you think it likely that it will happen. Now, for both of us, it logically can happen. This is a judgment of prior probability, not of certainty. But there will be judgments of prior probability that enter into and order, then, the cognitive process of any reasoner in any sphere. And that is the third reason why rebuttal of the single epistemic calculus view must follow. There is no single epistemic calculus. Arguments about justification, arguments about whether it's reasonable to believe that P, where P is anything you like, will depend first on the kind of claim that P is, second, on the cognitive situation of the believer, and third, on the unavoidability of axiomatic and prior probability commitments. Okay, this may all sound gloomy. It may sound like, well, then we're stuck, aren't we? But no, we're not. 3b encapsulates one of Newman's signal contributions to this question, the illative sense. Chapter 9 of the Grammar. If you just want to read one chapter of the Grammar, would that make sense? Probably not, but if you only do read one chapter, read chapter 9. That's a chapter in which he treats the illative sense. The word illative, 3b, this is 3b1, is derived from illatus, which is the participle of inferre, meaning to infer. So the illative sense is the sense that you have, that everybody has, that such and such is likely to be the case. It's the sense that provides you the capacity, first of all, to predict, that is to say, to make judgments about what's likely to happen in the future, and second, to order cognitively the world as you find it. Much of the operation of that sense will not be given to you by the syllogistic, that is to say, by demonstrative arguments derived logically from premises. It works in quite other ways. And Newman's task in chapter 9 is to unpack or explore how the illative sense in fact works. Look at the quotation in 3b2. A controversy, he says, is carried on from starting points and with collateral aids not formally proved but more or less assumed. The process of assumption lying in the action of the illative sense as applied to primary elements of thought respectively congenial to the disputants. Not that explicit argument on these minute or minor though important points is not sometimes possible to a certain extent, but it is too unwieldy and expedient for a constantly recurring need, even when it is tolerably exact. Newman has in mind here disagreements among historians, and the example he discusses is the interpretation given by the historian Edward Gibbon of the place of Christianity in the fall of the Roman Empire on the one hand, and the interpretation he, Newman, prefers of that matter on the other hand. And he notes that these two interpretations are at almost every point incompatible. Newman is one of the great polemicists against Christianity, and Gibbon, rather, is one of the great polemicists against Christianity, and Gibbon's footnotes, especially his footnotes on Augustine, deserve to be read all by themselves as examples of high English polemical fervour. Newman matches him in this respect. They're both great practitioners of the art of English style. But Newman's point in discussing this is not to say that these two historical construals can easily be resolved as to which is right. He's pointing to the reasons or causes for their difference. They differ because of starting points, collateral aids, which are not formally proved or provable. They differ because he and Gibbon are historians working with different functionings of the illative sense. Newman's illative sense doesn't work the way that Gibbon's does. Both of them have one line. Hence, the uselessness of argument usually for resolving differences of that sort. Let's now look at the quotation under 3b3, which I had aspect theory and difference. Quote, these instances of apparently unresolvable disagreement suggest how it comes to pass that men differ so widely from each other in religious and moral perceptions. Here I say again, it does not prove that there is no objective truth, because not all men are in possession of it, or that we are not responsible for the associations which we attach and the relations which we assign to the objects of the intellect. But this it does suggest to us that there is something deeper in our differences than the accident of external circumstances. The topic here is similar to the one in 3b2. The topic here is, why is it then that there appears to be disagreement about topics of central or fundamental import that do not yield to argument? You can offer people as many arguments as you can shake a stick at and they won't change their mind. The cause for that has nothing to do with the truth of the matter. Newman's argument, remember, is not about truth. He is as firmly convinced of the truth of Catholic doctrine as anybody here. The argument here has to do with how it is that we come to know what is true and what the formation of our relative sense is. Because there are different processes of formation of that sense, it will simply not be the case that argument will ordinarily alter anything. And if you look at the quotation in 3b4, which I won't read, you'll see that he affirms then, as a result of his description of how the illative sense works, he affirms a fundamental working principle, which is that credulity is the first principle of good cognitive function, not doubt. Credulity, not doubt. One is justified in believing what one believes, in making the assents that one makes, unless and until there is strong reason not to. Contrast the fundamental movement of modern philosophy since Descartes, which begins not with credulity, but exactly with doubt. The thrust of Newman's argument about the illative sense is that to begin with doubt and make doubt the operative principle of your epistemology is itself a theological theory. So I need you to look at quotation 3b4 by itself. Let's now apply what I've just said to Sacra Doctrina, or Sacra Doctrina simply meaning what the Church teaches, content of Catholic doctrine. Newman's picture here is that for most human beings, there's a subclass that he separates, but for most human beings who are not Christian and not Jewish, Newman's set of sortals for ordering the universe essentially is Christian, Jew, pagan. You've got to be one of those. And pagans are then further subdivided into the good kinds and the bad kinds.